Who's been sitting in my chair? It was my 29th birthday, and I'd called a few friends over for a celebration. It was my last year in the 20s, and then I'd be moving into the terrible 30s, when I'd be bound to start examining my life and totting up my successes and failures and eyeballing my "to experience before I die" list as the chances of fulfilling it grew more and more remote. Letty had stayed back after they all left to help with the clearing up. She was my best friend, and we'd always had each other's backs. Now we flopped down on the living room sofa, propped up our tired feet on the table, and sipped from the glasses of ice and Coke she'd poured us both. She'd hidden one bottle in my bedroom for exactly this purpose, and I'd laughed when she told me. But now, it hit the spot perfectly. After a few delicious moments, Letty said she wanted me to open her present in front of her. She wanted to see my reaction. That was odd, but she wheedled, "Indulge me, Terry." So I did. She passed me the gaily wrapped package, and even before I touched it, I knew it was books. What could be so intriguing about books, I wondered, as I read the gift card on top. Friends forever, Terry and Letty, and a smiley face. A bit dramatic by Letty's standards, I thought, but reached out and gave her hand a squeeze. She was a solid friend. I opened the gift wrap in my usual way, starting off carefully, trying not to damage the wrapping paper, as if I was planning to reuse it, then irritated by that thought, tearing into it so there would be no such chance. 2 leather-bound, gilt-edged books tumbled into my lap. They were gorgeous, with elaborate gold embossing on the front and back and a ridged spine. One was a full-bodied red and the other was a handsome royal blue. They were works of art, and my fingers lingered over them, absorbing the sheer loveliness of them. As my hand slid down the cover of the red book, its name slowly appeared, and I almost jumped in delight. My eyes flew to the second book, and I burst out laughing in complete joy. I leaned towards Letty, the precious books ensconced safely in my lap, and burbled at her, "Where did you find them, Letty? 2 of my favorite books, and such beautiful, beautiful editions." Letty smirked. I was lucky. "They're second-hand, you know that, don't you?" "They're in mint condition, Letty. I'd be surprised if they've even been read. Certainly not for a very long time. The pages open like a new book. And who reads Austen and Shakespeare anymore? Only fuddy-duddies like me." "Oh, thank you so much, Letty. They're just splendid. I'm going to really relish rereading them. Look at these lovely old pages with their gold edging and such a comfortable font too. I already love them." "The best is yet to come, Terry," she said mysteriously. "Read the flyleaf on the blue one." "No, not the red one, the blue one first." She watched me anxiously as I obeyed her instructions. It took a few moments. The inside binding of the cover was so pretty, butterfly patterns in faded colors. I stroked it with tender fingers. The slightly yellow pages, softly smooth to the touch, released the familiar smell of old books. These were surely going to become my favorite books. Not just the contents, which already were, but the actual physical books. They were a treasure. Letty squirmed with impatience. I turned finally to the flyleaf. The verso had the familiar picture of the playwright, with his receding hairline, scanty moustache, and big white collar, and on the recto, Letty had written in strong black ink with a fountain pen, "For my sweet Terry, with the hope you will enjoy this dear book as much as I have, I remain your sincere friend, Letty." And then she dated it, 3 days before my birthday. with the date and month and year all written in letters. The incorrect date was so un-Letty-like. I surmised it must have been the date she wrapped the gift, but still. And the message was so dated, which was even more un-Letty-like. She's a crisp, efficient person, as I am. This was such an old-fashioned inscription. It just didn't match up. And since when did Letty read King Lear? Now I was squirming. I still had my head down, thinking rapidly how to react, when I heard Letty say, "Now look at the red one." Relieved to have something to do, I pulled that one up and put it on top of the blue. The inside binding was also beautiful, faded roses, but I had little time for it. I turned purposefully to the flyleaf. On the verso was the well-known sepia image of Jane Austen, in her empire-waisted dress and frilled cap, and the twin curls on her forehead, her face averted from the portrait artist in the proper feminine manner, but her bold outward gaze belying any notion of meekness. I spent a scant second on it. I turned swiftly to the recto, and immediately I could feel my lower jaw hang away. Inscribed there in old black ink, washed out and palely purple with age, written with a thick-nibbed fountain pen in an old-fashioned flowing handwriting with many capitalizations and curlicues, the words, "For my sweet Teresa, with the hope you will enjoy this dear book as much as I have. I remain your sincere friend, Letitia." And it was dated exactly as Letty had dated the blue one, the exact same date. But 100 years ago! I simply couldn't believe my eyes. I just stared and stared at that page. I compared the two books. Letty had done a marvelous job of copying that inscription. I looked at her, and both of us were smiling through wet eyes. She shook her head and shrugged her shoulders. I saw them in a pavement stall. 5 or 6 weeks ago, he had only 2 leather-bound books, and those, your favorites. Sheer luck. All the rest in his lot was the usual paperback bestseller type. I don't know how he got these 2 and put them where I'd see them on that particular day. And when I came across that inscription, I was blown out of my mind. The names. And can you believe the date? So close to your birthday? It was just too much to take in. I couldn't have resisted them if they'd cost twice as much. I'm going to have to read them now myself, aren't I? She ended with a laugh. Both of us were laughing and crying. It was just so out of the world. I've cherished those books all these years, and I always read them one after the other. And I invariably spend time on those 2 fly leaves, caressing them, reading the twin inscriptions, marveling at them, and letting myself feel the eeriness of their reaching out and embracing Letty and me across a whole century. We are still inseparable friends, of course, the 2 of us. We must have been destined to be friends. That's why we took to each other so easily when we first met. And why these books presented themselves so opportunistically to Letty that fateful day. Just makes you wonder, doesn't it? Someone came knocking. Someone was knocking, but the door was wide open and there was no one there. As I stared at it, I heard the knocking again and realized it was not at the door, but at the window. Turning, I was astounded to see a crow tapping persistently with his beak on the open glass pane. My mother had been feeding a crow at her kitchen window every day and telling us what a gentleman he was, tapping politely to inform her of his arrival. She fed him tidbits of whatever she was cooking, and they had a chat. I assume she did the chatting. She'd never claimed he'd talked back. Though apparently, he cocked his head and looked at her in a most intelligent fashion, as if he understood every word. When Mother saw our reaction to her eccentric friendship, she reminded us that there was an ancient belief that crows carried the souls of ancestors, and feeding them was a noble duty. And now, here was this officious fellow tapping on my window. It could hardly be any other crow. What a colossal cheek! I ignored him at first, then waved him away, crying, "Whoosh!" in a fierce way. But he was unmoved. I muttered several remarks darkly about this being entirely my mother's fault, but that didn't budge him either. I was wary about getting pecked at and went to the window only when all else failed. I had no intention of feeding him, no matter what Ma said about the souls of our ancestors. I approached the window, flapping a small hand towel and crying to the insolent bird, "Get lost! I'm not giving you a crumb, so stop disturbing me when I'm trying to study. Whoosh, you greedy fellow! Ma has spoilt your habits, and now you think none of us has anything better to do except to run around finding tasty niblets for you. Well, you can jolly well think again. Wrong number this time, buddy. Now scram!" And finally, after much scolding, the wretched bird flew off with a flutter of angry feathers and a raucous cry. I walked up to the window boldly now and followed its flight, and I almost jumped out in shock, because as I peered down into the haze, who should it alight beside but my friend Lekha? How could it possibly be her? Was I imagining things? But it looked just like her from up here. I jumped up and down in excitement and waved madly at her, and she waved back. How on earth did she train the bird to do that? Find the correct window in the first place? What was she doing here at all? She should be shivering in the wet and cold of Cambridge, not standing here in the hesitant sunlight of the Delhi winter. I knew she couldn't hear me from up here, but I screamed at her anyway, gesticulating madly that I was coming down. Just wait a minute. She was cool and serene, the wicked thing, sketching me a sardonic salute. I flew out of the house, yelling to my mother that I was going downstairs. No time for explanations. I'll tell her later. I tossed a quick glance at the lift to see if by any chance it was already on our floor. It wasn't, and I had no patience to wait, so I flung myself down the stairs 2 at a time in my tearing hurry to greet my friend again. She hadn't said a word about coming back, and I had received a letter from her only 2 days ago. This was before there were cell phones or even computers, you know. We wrote letters by hand, if you can believe such a thing. Lekha must have wanted to surprise me. She'd certainly done that. But why had she returned mid-term? She was a top student in Cambridge or anywhere, so it couldn't be related to that. Lekha and I had grown up together, living in adjacent buildings. We'd been best friends, even though we studied in different schools. All our free time was together, and night spends were common. Then she decided to go abroad to study. She was a super brain and had earned a fantastic scholarship, you see. And there was no way I could even think of asking my parents to fund me. So we'd had to say bye-bye, and we'd both cried buckets. Lekha consoled me, saying I'd always be her best friend, and just because she was going and I was staying wouldn't make any difference to our friendship, which was what I'd secretly feared, of course. I'll be back soon, and the first person I'll come to meet is you, I promise, she'd sworn. Anyway, we could write letters to each other, which was what we'd done. But I'd really missed my friend nevertheless, and I was delirious with excitement that she was back. I flew out of the building and raced to where I'd seen her shouting, "Lekha, Lekha!" and running madly around because I couldn't see her anywhere. Was she hiding? Was this some game, I wondered? I asked the young kids who were playing there if they'd seen her, and one of them said insolently, "She's gone to London and forgotten about you." And I glared at him and replied, "That's very kind of you, Curly Top. First, it's Cambridge, and secondly, she's back. I just saw her." They all laughed, and I muttered, "Idiots," as I went off looking for her. I looked and looked, but just couldn't see her anywhere. I asked the drivers and the building watchman, but none of them had seen her, and all told me that Lekha had gone to foreign to study, as if I didn't know. I told them I'd seen her here only 2 minutes back, but they shook their heads sadly at me. They hadn't seen her in months. I decided to go to her house and check. I was beginning to feel a bit irritated. This silly hiding game had gone on for too long. I rang the doorbell at her house and waited. Nobody opened the door, but I knew they had to be home, so I rang again and again. I didn't understand what the silly game was, but I wasn't giving in. Finally, her brother opened the door. I exploded at him. "Why didn't you open the door earlier? Why has Lekha come back? Surely she isn't due to return now?" I was burbling with excitement and irritation, and it took me a few minutes to notice his expression and to stop chattering. His eyes were red. He was crying. I looked past him, and his parents were staring at me with tear-filled eyes and ravaged faces. A black weight descended on my head as I skidded to my knees in front of them. I couldn't make myself ask. It was in their faces. And the four of us cried and cried and cried. They'd received the devastating news just hours ago. She'd gone out to buy provisions, walked to the corner store, something she did every day. A drunk driver had flailed out of control, mowing down unsuspecting pedestrians as he skidded and skittered on the icy road, taking with him the best friend of my whole life. And in an instant, her joyful, vibrant, intelligent life had been snuffed out before she could experience even a part of the wonder it would surely have held for her. It was the strangest thing, and I can't explain it, and I don't often talk about it. But I know what I saw, and I firmly believe that in all the trauma and upheaval of that awful moment, Lekha somehow remembered her parting promise to me and kept her word and came back to see me once more before she left forever. Grandma held Ramya's tiny hand in her own large, warm one as they stepped out on the terrace together, keeping the little girl steady and calm as the sky overhead became dark with hundreds of crows reeling and swerving and screeching as they jostled for an early seat at the morning buffet. It was all a long time ago, my dear. But that's why I feed the crows. Doubting Thomas. We'd just finished breakfast. A late, leisurely, and luxurious breakfast. We'd hardly been here 2 days at Mukul's house, but his mum had fed us so fantastically, we'd survive on only the memories. She sent her son goodie boxes every month, and since they lived in Chennai and our college is only in Bangalore, they always come loaded with some really solid stuff. They're a lifesaver for us, forever starved and short of cash as we are. It's profitable to be Mux's friend in hostel, man, I tell you. One day, out of the blue, someone said, "The food must be damn good in your house, no?" And he moaned, "Awesome, yaar, even if you don't compare it to the filth we get in this bloody hostel." And next thing, 4 of us had hatched a plan to go over for the weekend. We left on a Friday after college and were to return on the Sunday, that's today, after a late breakfast, taking back a huge parcel of food for the journey. Mux's mum maintained that she drained out the whole of Chennai's supplies of food to feed the 4 of us, but she didn't look too unhappy about it. We hadn't seen a vegetable the whole weekend, or if we had, it was so brilliantly camouflaged I hadn't recognized it. And no pedestrian kati rolls or biryanis had crossed our lips either, but all exotic, continental and Thai food and bakes and cakes and waffles and fantastic stuff we'd never heard of before and couldn't afford on our meager hostel budgets anyway. Which was just perfect, thank you very much. Akshay, Imran and I were in food heaven, man. We were just soaking it up. Since Friday evening, it's been a food fiesta defying all imagination. How Mux is such a slender fellow beats me, man. Everything tastes divine, and we've been having 3 helpings at every meal and topping that up with dessert and staggering away from the dining table almost at bursting point. But in just a few hours, we are tempted back by the fabulous aroma to give the whole thing one more shot. His mum has organized food for the return journey too. Enough to feed the whole bloody hostel, it seems now. But I know we'll polish it off on the way and the poor saps at the hostel won't even get a sniff of it. We'd be leaving in an hour, but for the moment, Mux's parents and younger brother and the 4 of us were just lounging around and chatting idly. And suddenly I remembered the strange lady I'd seen last night. So I asked, "Where's the other lady?" Mux's mum answered me laughingly. "This is a mostly male household, son. I'm the only lady here. Which other lady are you talking about?" She looked cheekily at Mux's dad. "Have you been hiding one I don't know of, my dear?" Everyone laughed, and I felt a bit embarrassed at that awkward situation. So I bumbled in with both feet, ass that I am. "Sorry, auntie, uncle. Even I hadn't seen her before, but I mean the lady in our room last night. She was sitting in a rocking chair in the corner in the glow of the pedestal lamp reading a book. Immi and Akki were out for the count, but I woke suddenly and surprised her, I think. She left without saying a word as soon as she caught me looking at her." Mux's mum looked indulgent. "You must have dreamt it, son. There isn't a rocking chair in that room, nor a pedestal lamp. Didn't you notice that when you woke up?" I hadn't noticed, but then I wasn't that into interior decor. They were all laughing, but Mux's dad was looking at me over his spectacles, the newspaper casually crumpled in his lap. "Thomas?" he asked, leaning forward and peering pensively at me. Was she wearing a long blue dress? And was her hair loose, hanging long and curly to her waist? And did she blow you any kisses? Come on, lad, tell us everything. Akki and Imi laughed hard at that, swearing that if ladies were blowing me kisses, it was definitely a dream. But Mux and his mum and brother were staring at uncle, and then at me, and then back at him. The other 2 trailed off. and everyone went quiet. How the heck did Mux's dad know about the kisses? I'd been very careful not to mention them. I'm not a complete dork. But it seemed he was 2 steps ahead of me. He asked me to describe it in detail. It was so awkward. Everyone was staring, man. I didn't really notice. It was the middle of the night, uncle, 4 or 5 o'clock. Perhaps I did dream it. He said, "Close your eyes and let it come to you, son. Just say whatever you remember. It's okay. Don't worry." Everyone was silent now and concentrating on me. Damn embarrassing, man. But he nodded encouragingly and looked very sincere, and no one was laughing anymore, so I gave it a shot. I felt my eyes open in the bed, and I saw her sitting in the corner. She was bathed in a golden glow from a fringed lamp that hung over her. Her dress was blue, yes, with long sleeves and a high neck and lots of frilly white lace. She was reading a tiny book. It fitted inside her palms, and she looked up from it when she felt my gaze on her. She looked so cozy and comfortable, as if she was meant to be there. I didn't even wonder at her presence. She smiled very sweetly at me, and I also felt cozy and comfortable. She closed the book and put it away in her pocket, blew me a kiss, and glided off wordlessly towards the door. "Yes, uncle, you're right. She had long curly hair till her waist." She stopped at the door and turned and blew me another 2 kisses, slipped silently through the door and was gone. Neither of us spoke a word. The lamp was out. I don't recall her switching it off, but it was dark after she left. I waited a while, I think, wondering about her, but sleep must have overcome me soon. That's it. I can't remember anything more. Who is she? There was pin-drop silence in the room. They were all staring at me. Mux turned to his dad. How can it be that he saw her? He's still in college and he's way too young, isn't he? Uncle just shrugged his shoulders. She comes and goes as she pleases, Mukul. What can any of us say? Then he looked me straight in the eye, so I'd know he wasn't joking, and said, "She's our resident ghost. No one knows who she is. She's silent and harmless. But if she reveals herself to you, she's come to tell you you'll only have sons and as many as the kisses she blows you. She visited me after I got married and blew me 2 kisses. And as you see, we have these 2 heroes. She's visited others too, but always married men till now. The kiss system is 100% accurate so far. Perhaps you'll let us know how it turns out for you. She's promised you 3. He walked up to me and gave me a big welcome to the club kind of hug. I was a bit dazed, man. I'm still a bit dazed. I've described the scene 6 times to Mux, Aki and Emi, but I'm full of doubt myself. We've talked about nothing else the whole drive back. It's a bit crazy, no? Resident ghost and all. Who can believe that? Even though Mux has named at least 4 other men whom she has visited and blown kisses to. But I'm neither married nor on the verge of getting married, so what does that mean? I'm a bit freaked out, man. Suppose it's all a big game they're playing on me? If I let on that I believe it, or even that I suspect it may be true, they'll burst out in guffaws, and next thing I know, I'll be the laughing stock of the whole damn college. But would his family play along so convincingly, man? His dad looked for real, all that leaning forward and peering over the tops of his glasses stuff. His reaction looked like the real thing. All the others too. Mux is pretty damn mad that she showed herself to me and not to him. Claims he's been waiting his whole life. Emi and Aki are bummed as hell that they were sleeping like logs and missed all the fun. Or are they all in on the game? I no longer know which way is up, man. This bloody Mux and his wretched resident ghost have got me all tangled. I'm pretty sure they're having me on. It's got to be, isn't it? I mean, resident ghost? Come on, man. But I tell you, I saw that woman with her blue dress and curly hair. I can't believe she was never there. I did see her after all. I'm pretty sure I saw her. But I'm not totally sure, you know. I don't think it was a dream. Could it have been a dream? No, I don't think so. It couldn't really be a ghost, could it? But how did Mux's dad know about the kisses? I'm telling you, man, I saw her right there in the corner of her. The Doll's House. Just imagine, it had been sitting innocently on the floor of my cupboard all these years, and I'd not known. The school I'm headmistress of is close by, and I drop in to see my folks pretty much every day. So what call would I have to go rummaging around in my old cupboards? But I've moved in for a few days to help out since both mum and dad are unwell and I don't want it to escalate into pneumonia. So I'm back in my childhood bedroom, and after alternately ignoring the carton and wondering about it, I checked it out today. And I was stunned to see my old doll's house. When I was a little girl, mum and dad used to read me stories every night. Western stories as well as Indian ones. And I was tremendously taken with the concept of a doll's house. No such exotic thing was available in our part of the world at that time. But I was so excited about the whole idea that unbeknownst to me, Dad started visiting auction houses and sale lots from departing expats, hoping to get lucky. It took 2 years. To say I was beside myself with delight is to underestimate it by miles. I couldn't understand how any child could be willing to be parted from such a fabulous thing, or how any parent could have left it behind. I declared there and then that if my parents ever tried to give it away, I would run away from home and never come back. The front facade opened magically on a hinge like the cover of a book, so you could easily reach inside. There was a mummy doll and a daddy doll and son and daughter dolls, all with golden hair and blue eyes. The doors and windows actually opened and closed. The ground floor had a fitted kitchen, living room and dining room, and a staircase going up. And the upstairs had 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, all fully furnished. Only one bathroom between 2 bedrooms was unfair, and that too upstairs. Whatever guest needed to use the toilet, I asked. This triggered a discussion on different cultures, which naturally led to repurposing the doll's house to suit our culture. It was a massive makeover project. We started with Indian clothes in silk with zari and embroidery. The yellowed and peeling walls were repapered with gift wrap. The pictures on the walls were English country scenes with hounds and horses, so Dad helped me create new ones using stamps and matchboxes. We used pictures of Gandhiji and Nehru and tigers and elephants and lotuses. I sandpapered the furniture with Mum's emery board nail file and painted it with brown nail polish. We sparted up the bathroom fittings and the kitchen appliances with white nail polish too. And we bought a tiny pink plastic kitchen set that included kadhais and pressure cookers and a wooden rolling pin like the one we used at home. We retained all the old English stuff. It could come in handy at Christmas and Easter. But most of the year, our golden-haired family lived an Indian life. And I even fulfilled my desire to tie Rakhi on a brother through those dolls. I made newspapers for the daddy, knitting needles out of toothpicks for the mummy, and I served them meals of real food sometimes. It was a huge adventure, and I was having the most fun a little girl could possibly have. Of course, friends came over to play with this exotic object, but I was possessive and bossy and doled out favors in measured doses. I took all the decisions, big, small, or irrelevant. It was my personal fiefdom, and you played on my terms or not at all. My parents tried to temper my behavior, but I was obsessed with that doll's house. It was the singular focus of my life. Once it was fully redecorated, it looked resplendent, and I was giddy with delight. And then the funny stuff started. I had it out with my mum. Why had she moved the daddy doll without my permission? I'd left him in the living room reading the newspaper when I went to school, and he was in the dining room when I came home. Only I could make these changes. It was my doll's house. She dismissed me lightly. Did I think she had no other work to do all day except to be playing with dolls? Go! I must have shifted him myself and forgotten. I complained to Dad that night, but he assured me no one would interfere with my toy, which didn't pacify me at all since I knew someone was interfering with it. It could come off in seconds. I'd leave the room for a moment, and no one could possibly have hopped in and out so fast unnoticed. Yet, something would be altered. Very obviously, so I'd notice right away. You cannot imagine the ruckus I created. I suspected them all, individually and jointly. I was hyper-vigilant and always sneaking around, bursting suddenly into the room. And though I never caught anybody doing anything, things were still being moved. I was in a kind of frenzy. Who was doing it, and how were they able to do it, unseen? There was no fun left, and I no longer wanted to play with the doll's house. But I couldn't resist checking. And nearly every day, something was changed. I began to dread the whole contraption and whoever or whatever was meddling with it. One fateful day, I reached a kind of semi-hysteria, crying and screaming and thrashing about on the floor in an agony of unspoken fear and frustration, till I was actually sick with a burning temperature and had to be put to bed. When I recovered and came out again a few days later, the doll's house had been quietly removed. I didn't dare ask about it. Frankly, I was relieved. From that day to this, I've never laid eyes on it again. I've thought about it often, especially as an adult. There had to be some rational explanation, but I didn't ever mention it. So I could hardly believe the darn thing had been here all along, hiding in plain sight. I brought the carton down to the living room, a bit warily, I confess. There were unresolved issues here, and my flesh crept as I unpacked that box. But the poor doll's house looked woebegone and dilapidated, and nothing like the sinister thing it had become in my mind. It was sad to see it like that. So between nursing, medicating, and generally overseeing everything, I impulsively took up the humongous task of refurbishing it. It was exciting, like being 10 all over again. Glue, paint, scissors, needle and thread, bits of colored paper and cloth, and zari ribbons were back on the work table. And soon enough, the doll's house was restored to its former glory. Everything was going really well, and when we celebrated Dad's birthday, I put a tiny piece of cake in front of the daddy doll to come back a while later and see him sitting before a plate of plastic fried eggs. I felt the air empty out of my lungs in a whoosh, and my knees almost gave way. I'm an adult now, a practical and no-nonsense, school headmistress, and I could not possibly be seeing what I thought I was. This was madness, and I was not going to subscribe to it. But the old unspoken terrors and tensions came surging back and swamped me with their noxious vapors. I logicked myself as hard as I could, but my heart hit 100 on the panic meter. I refused to accept the evidence of my eyes, which made it doubly horrid. For over the next few days, I was presented with any number of situations. The mummy doll was not where I left her. The living room furniture was rearranged. The paintings in the dining room were switched. I daren't say a word to the parents, and fortunately, they didn't notice. In a rerun of the past, I caught myself creeping around the house on tiptoe, and I felt physically choked from holding my anxiety in. The parents couldn't be doing it, I knew, not with their arthritic fingers. Nor the nurses and maids either. And I knew I wasn't. Which didn't leave any sensible options. I stood with one leg precariously in the present, determined to hang on to adulthood and rationality, while the other leg threatened to drag my mind and body into a terrifying and irrational past. Even as sensible an adult as I am, suddenly found myself drowning in vividly remembered childhood fears. I cannot express how unspeakably horrid it was. And I'd put too much manic effort into restoring it to pack it away without a coherent explanation. Mum had started on at me about their being much better now, and how long was I going to nursemaid them, and I should get back to my own home. And she was right. The doc had confirmed they'd both turned the corner. So after a few days, I let myself be convinced. First thing I did was pack that doll's house and all its trimmings back into a large green garbage bag and lower the whole lot into the carton, which I taped and secured as firmly as Fort Knox. I considered destroying it, but that would have required too many explanations, not least to my rational self. So I carried it upstairs and pushed it back into its old place at the bottom of my cupboard. It no longer looked innocent to me, but filled with looming menace. You can laugh at me, but I tell you quite plainly, you open that box at your peril. And if you say it looks shabby and needs restoring, you'll have to pass through me before you get anywhere near it. You'll say it's just a beautiful old doll's house and I'm being a ninny. It is a beautiful old doll's house, I quite agree. But this much I'll tell you for certain. It's not just that. And I'm certainly no ninny.